Okay, we'll get started. It's my pleasure again to host this fifth in the series of the Flourishing student webinar series. It's brilliant, as I say, to see so many people coming back to this series from various places around the world, and also a lot of new faces. Every time between the webinars, the number of registrations for this series is increasing. A lot of people watch these back, so we will be recording this session and watch these back. And in fact, we're just about to set up a new place on the Jubilee Centre website where we'll republish all the webinars that have been previously posted. And I think given the increasing population of registrations, I think there's nearly 450 now people registered for this series. We'll be looking to do another series of these next year as well. So watch out for that coming forward. But for now, I just want to say a really big welcome and thank you to our presenters today from the Ihnatowycz Institute for Leadership at the Ivey Business School at Western University in Canada. This series has been to the UK, it's been to the US, it's going to Spain, and now we're in Canada. And what we're really excited about bringing in our colleagues from the Ivey Business School to speak to us today is because quite a lot of what we've been looking at in this webinar series is kind of approaches to character education across a whole university. But what they do superbly well at the Ivey Institute, as well as kind of having their character leadership approach infused into the kind of student code of conduct, they're also really integrated into their degree and their business kind of school degree program. So it's an opportunity for us to see how you might take this focus on character and character leadership in particular in this perspective into kind of particular discipline areas within the university as well. So I'm delighted that we've got two presenters from the Institute today. That's Gerard Seijts, who's Professor of Organizational Behaviour and also the inaugural Director of the Ihnatowycz Institute for Leadership, and his colleague Dusya Vera, who's the current Executive Director of the Institute, and was also Professor of Strategy at the Ivey Business School. So I'm going to hand over to Gerard and Dusya now. And just before I do, just to say, please do submit your questions either by the chat feature, or I'll be happy to bring people in at the end if you want to raise your hand and ask your question directly to Gerard or Dusya. But if you've got questions, please do put them in the chat feature and we'll make sure we pick them up at the end of the presentation. So I'll hand over to you now, Gerard and Dusya.
All right. Welcome everybody. Let's make sure I actually get to see you. I'm not sure where my bar. Here we go. More and show the video panel. Fantastic. There's everybody, or most of you anyway. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Tom, thank you for that introduction, and congratulations to you and all your colleagues at the Jubilee Center for putting up this particular series. I know critically important to have a conversation around how to cultivate character in individuals, our students, our leaders, our citizens, to facilitate flourishing, their well-being, and quite frankly, creating better communities and better societies. Dusya and I are particularly happy to present our work this morning for us, local time here, and talk a little bit about what it is that we've been up to since 2010, when the Institute came into being. I will be presenting the first, give or take, 20 minutes, and then turn things over to our current Executive Director of the Institute, Dusya. I will also say, before I get into the meat of things, that there's nothing wrong with your screen in terms of the way the slides are presented. That's just my preference. So maybe that is slightly different from what you have seen before. So in the limited time that I have, I like to talk about four key things. First of all, who we are and how the Institute came into being, because I got to tell you, my interest wasn't always in leader character, but something happened in 2008 and 2009. I want to talk about the framework that Tom was talking about. The framework is really foundational, is based on good scholarship, but it is foundational to all the activities in student programming and in outreach. Talk a little bit about those activities. And then finally, if we have time, I'd like to show a quick clip. We have we have several courses where we zero in on leader character. One of them is leadership under fire, and it might give you kind of an indication of kind of the stuff that we do here at our school. And then I turn things over to Dusya, who will talk about how to develop character and what it is that we're doing out of the Institute and out of the business school. But first things first, what is our beginning? Our beginning really was the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis, and quite frankly, lots of conversations in those days as to how leadership actually facilitated or contributed, right, to the crisis. And as a leading Canadian business school, a business school that is in existence now for over 100 years, a school that has always been interested in the development of the next generation of leaders, whether for the public, the private, and not-for-profit sector, we had to take a stand on this. You know, many of us thought this was a wildly interesting question. What was the role of leadership in the lead-up to? Wildly interesting because the assumption was that many of the people that were at the epicenter of it all were oftentimes seen as the best and brightest. Many of them went to the best academic institutions in the world. And yet, and so a number of colleagues and I, we just started to think, reflect, and write. But, you know, at the end of the day, the key question always is, does our writing resonate with people that were actually there, that are in the C-suite? Not necessarily the financial services industry, but people around the periphery, people in organizations, public, private, not-for-profit sector. To make a long story short, that initial paper we put up for discussion and conversation. All major Canadian cities. We went to London, UK, New York. We have a campus in Asia, conversations there as well. Out of all of those conversations, lots of learning around leadership. And there's a key sentence that resonated with me, with many of my colleagues, and at least for me, really transformed both my research focus as well as my teaching. Out of those conversations, a key sentence. When it comes to good, effective, strong leadership, competencies count, character matters, and commitment to the role is critically important, right, to organizational success. Now, competencies are relatively straightforward. Most of the time in business schools, we always talk about competencies, whether this is strategic, whether this is organizational, right? Commitment. It doesn't take much to anticipate, to understand what commitment is, right? As I always say, you enjoy the role of leadership, enjoy the crown, or the perks that come with the role of leadership, wear the crown, wear the tiara, but doing the hard work of leadership, right? That deep commitment, that engagement, the loneliness at times, the sacrifice that all of us will have to make in those profoundly important positions. But what was most surprising in all of those conversations was the passion with which people talked about character. We didn't probe this. People talked about it. And there were two immediate questions. Hey, what is it? Because you talk to 25, 100, 450 people. Most of those people had very different beliefs as to what character is and what it isn't. The second key question, is this something that can be developed? Or by the time people join a business school or organizations, character is set in stone. Great interest. In fact, such great interest that one of the participants, an Ivey alumnus, actually donated a lot of money, said, I want you to zero in on this critically important piece of leadership. It was also the campaign for leadership. At that time, Ivey was in fundraising mode to, you know, pay for this phenomenally new and beautiful building that we have. And so that led to the foundation of the Ihnatowycz Institute for Leadership. That's who we are. And we're relatively smallish, tremendous support, but with the resources that we have, I believe we have a clear focus. We aim to develop global citizens who have strength of character, strive to make a difference, and contribute to the flourishing of teams, organizations, communities, and societies. Almost all of the work that comes out of the Institute is focused around leader character. Maybe different from some other institutions that oftentimes are a mile wide and an inch deep. For us, this was the potent differentiator where we would like to make a real difference. And as I said, since 2010, we have been deeply engaged in research that is always the foundation. We're an academic institution, should always be the foundation of whatever we do in the classroom, our student programming, outreach, including executive education, and recently this cross-campus initiative. More about that in a few minutes. So our mission to elevate character alongside competence in the art and practice of leadership. Elevate, because if we, and we believe, and supported by both anecdotal and research evidence, character has a profound impact on individual, team, and organizational performance. For that reason, its relevance should be elevated and, quite frankly, placed at the same level as competencies that oftentimes have a stranglehold on what we teach, the leadership profiles that exist in organizations, etc. But critically important, what is leader character? And so for a good 3-4 years, that was the main focus before we could do anything. Now, this is the guiding piece for most of our activities. Now, you could argue, so where did this come from? Like, this must have been perhaps at some point, Friday evening, 8 p.m. Canadian time, 3 bottles of Malbec Chardonnay, and a group of us thinking, reflecting, and trying to synthesize what we've read in the literature. Not at all, because we really wanted to figure out what it is and come up with language that resonates with people in the public, the private, and the not-for-profit sectors. That was critically important, because there had been kind of instruments and frameworks before, but they didn't always resonate with the audiences that we interacted with. So this particular framework, based on at least 5,000 data points, conversations, qualitative, quantitative research with actual leaders, managers, and employees in a great many organizations. You'll see 11 dimensions or virtues. Language is important. Dimensions is a little easier for organizational leaders than virtues. And then the supportive behaviors or the illustrative behaviors of that particular dimension. So, for example, if we look at temperance, the dimension, the supportive behaviors, right, or the keywords, the elements would be patience, a sense of calmness, composed, etc., even in the most stressful or dire situations. Now, of course, we have done much to develop and validate this particular framework. We have related it to individual and organizationally relevant variables. We have tested whether this is different from psychological capital and the big 5 personality, because character has to explain variance over and above. Is it perfect? I don't know. It is pretty good. Are there other frameworks that colleagues are using at other institutions? Of course. But this is our framework. And quite frankly, if we can have a robust conversations about the various merits or the merits of the different frameworks, that can only help our common cause. So this is our framework around leader character. Now, as I said earlier, before we move anywhere, it is critically important that it is based on good scholarship. We believe it is. We even had the Institute of Corporate Directors involved, right, in these conversations to really see whether our thinking, our research actually made sense. We believe it does. And our research seemed to suggest, people agree, peer-reviewed journals, and I think this research speaks to the rigor of what it is that we do. Maybe everything started in 2013, developing leadership character in business programs, right? It was pretty much the first study, or not so much a study, even though we bring kind of qualitative findings into that piece, but that was kind of a statement. A foundational piece would be the Journal of Management Studies in 2017, where we present this framework, we articulate how we arrived at this, etc. Of course, we never say that it is only character, it is character plus competence. So colleagues Mary Cross and Dusya have this article in the Leadership Quarterly around the entanglement, because you could easily make the case that oftentimes it is the courage or dimensions of character that helps us to activate the critical competencies of leadership. People oftentimes discuss, so this particular framework that you have, does it generalize across different cultures, genders? Because sometimes when, we believe somebody is courageous, a man is courageous, but perhaps for a female, it's too assertive. Hence the title, does leader character have a gender? overall, I think a strong, very competent foundation, a confident foundation from which good things can happen. Critically important also is to translate that research into practice, because if this is the best kept secret, then it is not a lot of fun. So again, we're very active as an institute to translate our findings for consumption by leaders, public, private, not-for-profit sector organizations, and most recently, a book that I wrote with Kimberly Milani around that is very much almost like citizen focus, in the sense that you go to the local bookstore and you find this book on the shelves, a series of interviews with people that we believe are exemplary leaders because they demonstrated good, strong, well-developed character. Inspirational stories, lots of learning, and some ideas as to how this can be developed in everybody. Young, aspiring leaders, people mid-career, and perhaps even the more mature leaders. You find some really interesting people, I think, in that book. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, Maria Ressa, the Nobel laureate, Mary Robinson, first president, female president of Ireland. You'll be interesting for the British viewers here. Julia Hoggett, the CEO of the London Stock Exchange. Her mom, Lady Brenda Hale, who at one point was the president of the Supreme Court of the United States. Alan Job, the now former CEO of Unilever. A great many people talking about leader character. But of course, most important is student programming. What are we doing here at the Ivey School in both our degree granting and non-degree granting programs? Turns out a heck of a lot. Tom, you talked about the code of conduct. If we believe this is so important, then let's start thinking about the kinds of students we like to recruit to the Ivey School, but also what our expectations are once they are here. So we voted on this as a school, and it was embedded now in the code of conduct. The way we teach, we are a case-based school, much like Harvard. We use cases. With donor support, we wrote over, I'm not sure exactly about the number, but over, let's not talk about the numbers. We sold close to 200,000 copies in over 100 countries. I think that's impact. People care about this stuff. Of course, we supplement that with teaching notes, talking about our model, how the case can be taught, etc. We have particular student events, right, across the entire undergraduate program, MBA program, where we talk about character. One example, again, with tremendous donor support, is the Leader, Character, and Candor Conference, right? 2 keynote speakers in between a student programming session where we actually talk about the leader character insight assessment, a self-assessment, what this means, etc., how to improve, etc. And then character-related courses, electives mostly. Dusya leads a very successful course. I have one around development in the field of leader character. I think is a really interesting one, leadership in the fire, developing character. As I always say, it is so easy to talk about leadership or leader character in the classroom. We can easily talk about those 11 dimensions, how important they are. We can look at leaders and how they relied on those dimensions to navigate through particular crises, how that made them effective. But at the end of the day, cynically, I could say, but we didn't do anything. We had an academic conversation, a spirited conversation. You brought your Starbucks to the classroom. It's 23 degrees, very comfy chairs at the Ivey Business School, and we all felt good. But, if you really want to feel what character means, you need to be able to touch it, to smell it, to sense it. And so we developed this course in partnership with veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces. Off-site, we take 40 students, 2 cohorts in our undergraduate program, 1 cohort in our MBA program. And for 4.5 days in a location somewhere in Ontario, very austere, we work with them. 4 teams of 10 students. We have access to these students for 24 hours. We almost use 4.5 times 24 hours. Physically, mentally, emotionally stress testing these individuals. They work in teams, 4 teams of 10, and every activity is designed in such a way that students will have to activate 1 or more of those leader character dimensions to successfully complete this particular exercise. Oftentimes impossible, And most importantly, the debriefings, of course, is where the gold is. The self-reflections, the setting of behavioral goals to be perhaps do things better next time. We're very bold about this course. We say it's formative, but above all, transformative, because the learning these people take away, quite frankly, is profound. Facilitated, of course, by great leaders out of the Canadian Armed Forces, handpicked, typically also a business executive, and then, of course, Ivey faculty who facilitates almost everything. I think a great course. The waiting list for that course is very long. Hence, our fundraising and success in on the books a second elective. I have a clip. I don't want to compromise Dusya's time, so maybe at the end we can show it. And I would say the final piece or a key piece would be the outreach, as I said earlier, really important because we're creating all this knowledge. We're talking to our students, but this applies to so many other individuals. So we really go deep in announcing to the world what we do and that the work that we do has impact. So for example, the demands on the Institute are very profound and large. We have a relatively thin bench. We cannot do this all by ourselves. So under the leadership of Mary Crossan, we have the Leader Character Practitioner Certificate Program. For 13 days, Mary walks interested people through the background, through all kinds of activities and character building activities that can be implemented in organizations, how to tweak the systems, etc., to make this part of the fabric. It is wildly popular and deservedly so. Big piece. The middle picture, Thomas d'Aquino, and maybe in the United States or maybe in the United Kingdom, that name doesn't resonate, but in Canada, he's a big name. How fortunate we are to have people like Tom d'Aquino to actively, to visibly support us. This is the d'Aquino Lecture on Leadership, every year at Ivey, and our nation's capital in Ottawa or Toronto, a big name speaker, and there can be no doubt that this individual demonstrates exemplified great character. Always great interest to the students, and again, another piece of the plank, so to speak, of what we do in our programs. We have round tables. Maybe Dusya can talk a little bit about this. She was recently in London to talk about leader character. Now, leader character always in service of something. It can be in service of ESG. It can be in service of creating purpose-driven organizations. But round tables to apply our knowledge to different segments. And of course, invited presentations. You know, you see the director here as well, Kimberly Milani, who fairly recently spoke at the National Fire Academy, right? And so there is a real hunger and thirst, and of course, we're more than happy, right, to honor those speaking commitments because this is important. And of course, each year we have a practitioner conference, primarily for practitioners, sometimes academics, to talk about kind of the evolution of what it is that we're doing. And finally, and I think this is a really big win, is about a year ago, we got some great funding from a financial institution to say, listen, good work, high fives all around, but you got to think bigger, way bigger. You know, certainly the business school is not the only school, or it's not the school that owns leadership. It is embedded in so many other faculties across campus. And for all of those faculties and departments, character is a foundational piece as well. So collaborate across campus, put in place a leadership certificate on purpose-driven organizations in which character plays a profound role. And so Dusya is now in the process of getting all the approvals. Things look very good. But again, yet another example of the traction of the work that we do. And I wanted to say, I think we make a difference, but that's completely the wrong language because I know that we make a difference. Just like many other institutions here that are online, I think the work that you do, that we do, is of profound importance to create better leaders, better citizens, and ultimately better communities, organizations, and societies. So let me stop here. I think, Dusya, my 20 minutes are up, so I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about, well, how do we build character in our students and in our leaders? Dusya, over to you.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, so first, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for having us here. And I'm going to use the next slides to give you a little bit of a sense of the principles, the tools, the practices that we use actually in our courses, in our character development programs. One idea that we communicate to our students over and over again is that we are developing character every day through our daily activities, even if we know it or not. So one question that has become very core to how we talk about character is this one that you see on the screen. Who am I becoming while I am busy doing? You know, this idea that we're busy every day and that we are developing character through our busyness. So to be more aware of, are we becoming more courageous or less courageous, more humble or less humble, more patient or less patient through our day? We also use the metaphor of exercise. It's a way to, again, to communicate a character development. So you see in this slide, we talk about the anatomy of character, and that's, you see our framework here in the bottom, the framework that Gerard introduced. What is character? What is the language that we use to talk about character? We call that the anatomy of character, what it is, what are these dimensions? Then we use the word exercising character or developing character. And in a minute, I will walk you through these 5 levels of character development. But again, we talk about character as a muscle that can be exercised, character as habits that can be developed. And then in this other picture here, you see the Olympics, you know, and I will show you this framework that is in the bottom. The idea that there are systems around us that either support us or inhibit us from developing character. And the same way that an athlete has to think about all the Olympic system and all the how to get to the Olympics, we also talk about organizations not only having individuals who develop character, but character can be embedded into the culture of the organization, the HR systems of the organization, the communication practices of the organization. So we go from individual awareness to development and then to systems and embeddedness of character. And I'll show you more of that in a minute. Now, just walking you through this research, and I have added many of the references in the slide so that you can always go back to the actual research that talks about this. But we talked to our students about 5 stages of character. The first one, as you just heard us, is about even awareness. You know, what are we talking about? What is it? Discovering this language and discovering the dimensions. The second one, activating character, is about the idea that some of these behaviors are actually in us. They're latent in us, but we have to activate them. Can we activate being braver, being more patient, being more assertive? So we talk about reminders and priming, even Post-it notes around your as simple as Post-it notes around your screenshot. This idea of can I remember that I can be more assertive if that's the behavior. I can be more empathetic. And that we often reference Atomic Habits as one of the books that is very helpful to think about this activation. And that moves into the next stage, which is strengthening that behavior, where you actually work on developing the habit. So it's not just a reminder with a Post-it note anymore. It's actually being conscious, being cognizant about wanting to develop a new habit. And again, we often go back to Atomic Habits as a very popular, a lot of our students have read it, and they use that language of developing a habit, a virtuous habit in this case. Connecting character is about the principle that it's not enough to develop one virtuous dimension. So some of our students tell us, I am very driven, I am doing fine. I can check mark the drive circle in your framework. I have it all. But again, we could be very, very driven, and we could be bulldozers, you know, just running over people. So this connection, the connection between the behaviors, the dimensions, the virtues, of course, is critical. You know, we need to be driven, but we also need to be patient and empathetic and practice our humanity. So we talk a lot about the need to interconnect these virtues, because if not, we could fall into a bias of excess or a bias of deficiency. And then finally, sustaining these dimensions means that we don't use them only at home or at work, but we can activate and practice our character at home and at work and at school and in the supermarket, and also when we are under pressure. Okay, let me show you a couple more of the principles that we share in the classroom. And I know Cassie Ellis is here, and she's one of the authors of this work. We talk about the PABCs of underpinning character development. And again, this is connected to the anatomy of character. In order to develop character, it's not enough to just think about cognition, that we can read about it and we're going to learn it by just reading about temperance or reading about humanity. We have to understand that there are anatomical systems to actually being able to develop and practice character. So cognition, of course, is thinking about this new knowledge about character, but then understanding also the physical part of it, our emotions, our mood, and that how all of this affects behavior. Think about temperance. Our students express to us in class that they are very stressed. A lot of them have anxiety. And it's not enough for us to tell them, temperance it is. We have to develop patience. We go with them through breathing exercises, yoga, meditation exercises, mindfulness, so that they really understand the physiological components in their body that are affecting their ability to develop more calmness and patience. And that, of course, affects their mood and how they understand stress management or anger or impulsivity versus the ability to stay composed and calm and to be able to deal with many situations under pressure. So I put here this Spotify signal just to remind myself to tell you that there is research. If you go to this citation here, Crossan, Ellis, and Crossan, they have research talking about how music helps to activate character and how music helps to balance these PIBCs. So if you go to Spotify, you will find that we have added there playlists for character dimensions. There's a playlist for humanity, a playlist for temperance, for drive, for courage, etc. Okay. Another research component that we have and that we share in our classroom is these systems supporting character development. And again, this is this idea that we can have the intention, we really want to develop a new habit, but we do need to understand what is around us, the context around us that is either going to support us or inhibit us to make that intention a reality. So I'm going to go very quickly through this. Ability is just, how do you perceive that if it's going to be difficult or easy to develop this new habit, that it's going to impact how you move forward. The same with your attitude. What is your attitude about developing this new habit? Do you think there's going to be a favorable outcome at the end or a negative outcome at the end? Again, how does impact intention to develop character? Peers, do you have peer support or actually peer pressure, perhaps, to continue with some unhelpful behaviors? Culture, what is your surrounding in terms of the normative behaviors around you? Do they support the virtuous development of these new habits or not? And then lifestyle, how does your lifestyle look like right now? And it is supportive or inhibiting virtues. I can tell you, sometimes I complain that I am too busy. I'm too busy, I don't know. And that, of course, feeling busyness is not really super helpful to develop a new habit, because you need the time to reflect and the time to think about and to feel about and to balance your PABCs. And that is done when you're not running around. So again, systems, we talk about the anatomical part of character, but we also talk about the systems that we need around us to be able to develop character. And a few more ideas to finish my part. These are two tools that have adopted the research from the Institute. One is the Leader Character Insight Assessment. All our undergrad students have the opportunity to assess themselves on character. It can be done as a self-assessment or as a 360 when we have more time for that. Our executive education students actually do get 360 assessments of their character. And we also have, there is this app, Virtuosity app. It's a new tool that we're going to start to use in some of our courses, where our students will have the chance to use it throughout the semester with us. This is elective courses. And the app, given that the new generation is so used to using app, this app would act as a virtual coach to help them practice, again, create this habit of practicing and thinking about different behaviors of character. Now, this is the map that I promised I was going to show you. We call it the roadmap, the strategic roadmap. And again, the purple part is awareness. We always start with awareness. What is character and why does it matter? The dark green rectangle in the bottom is this idea of development. We need to go through this habit development. And here you can see a bunch of tools available. The trainer program that Gerard talked about. There's a podcast called Questions of Character, etc. This gray and light green part are opportunities to embed character in the systems of the organizations. And we talk, since our students are business students who are going to be, some of them are going into HR, they're going into strategy, they're going into communications, etc. We tell them how character could be embedded in that. So we have examples, we have cases, we have chapters, research on organizations that are now recruiting both considering competence, but also character. And again, how does this matter? We see operational excellence, well-being, and key performance indicators as the outcomes of this character work. I point you here to these two references. These are the people sometimes ask us about, numbers. Where do you see a difference? So I point you to these two articles in terms of how developing these character dimensions can help with leadership effectiveness and leadership resilience. But I also want to share with you qualitative, rich impact in stories, storytelling of the impact of these programs. And we work not only with our students at Ivey, but as Gerard says, we also work with organizations. Here, for example, the Canadian Armed Forces adopted character as part of their ethos. The Public Prosecution Service of Canada is one of the examples of organizations who changed their HR system so that they recruit now for character and competence. We have a very close partnership with the Ukrainian Catholic University. And through the war, they created this beautiful documentary, which is available in the Ivey website and on the Institute website, where they use the framework to talk about character being activated and developed and put it into action during the war. And there are three beautiful case examples. One of them is a business leader. One of them is a priest. One of them is a student who became a soldier. So it's in action, character in action is there at UKU. In the bottom, EY is one of the companies that went through the practitioner certification. And so they have now a certified leader character practitioner who is in charge of diffusing character within EY. And we, as Gerard also mentioned, now we are very closely connecting the character to the grand challenges of our time. And I know that's the topic of the next Jubilee conference, character and grand challenges. So we are working especially in the area of ESG, sustainability. Gerard's book and Kim's book also has examples of that. And with that, I think we are right on time. And I want to leave you here. You're going to get our contact information. Please contact us if you have any questions. Follow us on LinkedIn. Check our website. There are a lot of resources there. And of course, contact us if you have any other questions. But I know Tom is now going to go through questions here too. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much indeed, Gerard and Dusya. And that was really informative. And I think it was really nice to get into kind of focus of a particular kind of discipline area as well, and look at kind of how character plays out in that sense. I had lots of questions coming to me when I was listening to you, but I think in the spirit of kind of virtue, I should hand the questions over to those that are coming in and our guests across the screen. So I'll start to work through these that come in the screen, and please do feel free, anyone who wants to raise your hand, and I'll invite you in as well. But let's just start with Marissa's question, because that came in first. I think that was relevant to when you were talking about kind of measurement instruments at that point. So just saying whether you published anything in that area.
Gerard, do you want to talk about your work with Sigma in creating the LCA?
Sure. So first of all, yes, that LC, the Leader Character Insight Assessment, is available. I should say it's commercially available, both in self-assessment and 360. And of course, I don't know the exact numbers, but steep discounts for student audiences, etc. So here's how that works, because obviously we can talk about this, but we need to have that conversation piece, as I always label it. You and I can think and talk about character, but in the absence of an instrument that contains the right language, what are we going to do in organizational settings? So once we had a rough idea as to what those dimensions were, we had to generate a lot of kind of behavioral items, right? Character, habit of being, behavior, everything had to be behavioralized. Again, has very little to do with how smart we were here at Ivey, but everything to do with kind of listening, looking for examples from leaders in the public, the private, and the not-for-profit sectors. So this item pool that you always need when you develop instruments. Then we needed to test those items for clarity.
My future goals is
for clarity, for the language. We ran statistical analyses that, for example, all the items we had in mind for integrity or collaboration or temperance actually load on those particular dimensions, right? So we went through a fairly elaborate process. Certainly, we had kind of the intellectual content, but Sigma Assessment Systems was a really helpful partner in all of this. So I think I have two colleagues here, Laurie and Kim. If that makes sense, just put the address, the web address of Sigma Assessment Systems. If there's any questions, the person you really would like to talk to would be Julie Carswell. She has been foundational, right, to helping push this forward. And as Dusya said, we use in a great many programs. It is just a starting piece for our individual reflections on character, where we score high, where we perhaps score a little lower, what might be Achilles' heel. It's actually very helpful to start that conversation using the LCA.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And just sorry, carry on, Dusya.
I was going to say, there is also a research. You can also contact SISMA and say that you don't need it for programming, but you need it for research. So they can have conversations with you, both if you want to use it for your students or if you want to use the scale for research.
Yeah, and thanks for posting the YouTube clip. Please, everyone, don't rush off to watch that just now. Just wait for the next end of the presentation before you link to that. Johan, nice to hear from you. And Johan, I think I'm interpreting your question right. You're saying, have you found the college university level students most receptive? I mean, I'm also interested to the level of receptiveness about this, perhaps in a kind of a business type course when people might think, well, yeah, ethics is clearly important on surface level, but actually I want to get on with with the real stuff that is going to get me the jobs and careers. Clearly, we know that that's nonsense, but that could be an impression going through. So I think you're saying about receptiveness of students, and I think what he's trying to suggest is whether this is comparable to any work you might have done in high school and different in those settings.
Okay. My Lord, Tom, that is such a loaded question, right? And I have so much to say on this. First of all, I would correct you because sometimes we think that character is ethics. It's not. I mean, even this book, it was a bestseller in the ethics category of Amazon Canada, but it's not an ethics book. It's a character book.
Okay.
And of course, ethics is part of that, right? Or well-reasoned decisions, but it's simply more than ethics, right? So let me get that out. So here's the thing. Are we capturing all students? Of course not. I can imagine even some of our faculty colleagues might be somewhat cynical, or they question it. And questioning is fine because I can engage you in a conversation. I'm perfectly fine with that. What I will say is that there has been a lot of uptake, I would say, amongst our colleagues because we have these great events. And we need help from our colleagues in bringing this to MBA, executive MBA. We have now people to talk about character in executive programs. So colleagues embrace this. Perhaps not all of them. Some of them might be cynical. Some of them might be questioning what we're doing. Fine. The fact that we have students sign up for these courses with long waiting lists actually is very encouraging. I think students will find this and look around, whether this is sports, whether this is politics, whether this is business, whether even if this is science and academic institutions. Like, people keep giving us these great gifts of poor leadership, not so much kind of competencies, but character related. So intuitively, I think people will get this. And I think intuitively people understand that there can be no learning without, as Dusya said, a bit of introspection, a bit of humility. So are we capturing all students? Of course not. I mean, in year one, we have 750. Some of us might blow us off, but you know, they could blow off leadership, they could blow off accounting, they could blow off anything. But I'm really heartened by the fact that we have tremendous momentum in many of the activities that we do. Dusya?
Yeah, and the undergrads are all exposed to character through the events and through the assessment in their first year. So the 750 do get awareness, you know, that first step, the awareness step that I talked to you about. We do make them aware of character and what it is and why it matters. And then in the second year, when they take electives, that's when we get the ones who maybe are really passionate about. So they take Gerard's Leadership Under Fire class. There is a class called Transformational Leadership, where we go one by one through each of the dimensions of character. So those are electives. And then we get the students who are really passionate. There's another class, Learning from Leaders, that Gerard teaches, another class about values and putting values in action. So the first year, Tom, it's more foundational awareness for everybody. And then the second year is electives.
Yeah, and I forgot to say something really interesting, Dusya. You reminded me of that. I mean, in many ways, Dusya, the way you described this year one, we whet people's appetite. And this event that I talked about, the Leader, Character, and Candor Conference, we give people the opportunity to take the LCA. We're not behind their back with a stick. We give them the opportunity. So if we get 600 out of 750, I would say, Tom, that's a pretty strong batting average. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Now, it fluctuates a little bit, but at least there is that interest. And then it is up to the faculty, right, to actually bring that home and make it count to the students. Dusya.
Yeah, and one more thing before the next question, Tom. Yes, about this idea of how receptive they are to character, going back to the word receptive. One way to how we describe this, because judgment's in the middle of the framework that we show, is sometimes you are right. Students may say, oh, this is another ethics class, or oh, we're going to talk about ethics again. But because we emphasize practical wisdom, you know, what Aristotle called practical wisdom, judgment in more business terms, we call it judgment. Then we really get their attention. But we're saying this is judgment for decision making. We're not telling you, be ethical or unethical. We're telling you be good at decision making. Practice practical wisdom. So I think that makes them more receptive. And then, of course, we linked into the story about the financial crisis. Those leaders had MBAs, had business degrees, knew a lot about finance, but they still, we went through a global financial crisis. So it was not a failure of their competence. They were very smart and competent. It was a failure of character. So when we talk about judgment and practical wisdom and decision making, that I think makes them more receptive about, okay, I am more curious about that because I do want to be a leader with good judgment.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And there's obviously students choose different sorts of kind of elective courses for different sorts of reasons. But what it does come down to, and this relates, I think, to Veronica's question, or second half of the question, at least very clearly, is like any subject, it's quality of teaching. It's the quality of, if you're going to develop engagement in teachers, it's got to be teachers who really want to engage. And I think Veronica's second part of the question, which I think you answered the first bit in talking about the different levels, but the second part is, how, and you said this, Gerard, whether teachers are on, kind of whether your teachers are on board, but also how do you kind of, Veronica uses the word form here, kind of how are teachers actually kind of supported to be able to deliver the sorts of curriculum expectations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even more important, Tom and Veronica, I would say the program directors are important because they gave us the space to experiment with this. They actually gave us the opportunity to have program events, right? They gave us opportunities to invite some really challenging, but this might scare people off, but let's be honest. Every year, Andy Fastow right? And now former CFO of Enron comes to talk to the students. Now, he's connected with a case conversation we have around the global financial crisis, and in particular what happened in Iceland. And Andy Fastow is very familiar with our conversations, and he takes us through his days at Enron and how lack of character actually got him in a heap of trouble. So we get a lot of support, again, from the associate dean programs, from the program directors, and our colleagues. And I think many of our colleagues are just intrigued by this. But also, I think under the leadership of Dusya, she has a very good pitch to actually get them involved in activities of the Institute. So I think we're in very good shape here.
Right, excellent. I'm going to bring in some people so we can hear some other voices. Milan, I saw your hand go up first.
Yeah, thank you. One, I just want to thank you both, I think, actually, for all the work that you're doing in this area. And this presentation, I've used actually the Developing Leadership Character book in a course that I used to teach, and found it very valuable. And more recently read the Character Compass. But Gerard, I haven't read your most recent book, so I look forward to getting that as well. My question is really about, I'm similar to this last one. I'm thinking about how do we integrate, kind of across programs, across the university. And one of the things that intrigued me, that I learned about in the Character Compass book, as referenced it briefly here, is the Virtuosity app. And I was just curious how if you, and I don't have a perfect sense of, I guess, how long that's been available, but I'm curious about how use cases for that. Do you see that being used in courses as well? And do you have any experience with that in terms of its impact? And part of my curiosity is also just from the measurement side. It seems like there's so much research opportunities, right, to understand the impact and how people are practicing these virtues.
Yeah, for the Virtuosity app, it is a separate company from Ivey, but it does use the research from the Institute. So there are 2 classes right now that are going to start to use it for the first time at Ivey. It is a new app, so this is right at the beginning, Milan, in learning how to incorporate it into the curriculum. It does include the assessment in the app, and it goes dimension by dimension with a lot of exercises. So the class that I teach, that actually we go dimension after dimension, talking about how to develop each of these virtues. That's how I want to couple it with that, because in addition to just the exercises that we do in the classroom, the students having the app with them all the time, they could be assigned to have a development program through the app. But it's that right at the beginning, Milan. So I'll put the website there. You can contact them directly because
Thank you, Dusya. Milan, thank you for that question. I would say you can make me even happier when you buy 100 copies of this newly released book. So you'll be my hero. But all kidding aside, actually, I'm sure there's people from the Oxford project here online. The person instrumental in developing the app is Corey Crossan. She works currently at the Oxford project, so it would be easy to reach out. And again, I'm asking Laurie, maybe Kim, maybe Cassie, just to put in the chat just Corey's contact information, and you can reach out to her. She also used this app for her dissertation research. So Milan, great question, and she can tell you lots more about how she used it in her research.
Of course. Thanks very much for that answer. And I don't think Corey's with us right now, or indeed Ed Brooks, but I would recommend you contact with Corey, and obviously very well connected with your centre or institute in a different way as well through her mother. Monica.
Yes, hi. Very interesting presentation. I was very excited about what you're doing. I have a question, and this is what Dusya was saying earlier. I'm interested in wise organizations and wise leadership. So in your model in the middle, right, instead of judgment, why don't you call it, practical wisdom?
Gerard?
Okay. This might be just nitpicking, right? I cannot go in good conscience into an organization and start talking about practical wisdom. I think people are rolling their eyes. And let me give you an example, Monica. In the early days, when I got so excited about this work, way before we ended up with this particular model, I thought, I've got to bring this into my executive education. I want to talk about this stuff because this is foundational, this is relevant. So I won't mention the instrument, but you read between the lines so you know what I'm talking about. That instrument had kind of these descriptors like love and zest. While I was debriefing the instrument and talking about this, people were rolling their eyes. This was in the first 15 minutes. I still had 4 hours to go. I lost people. If there is one thing that I have learned about bringing things to executive audiences, is that language is really important. I hear what you say, right? And in fact, I'm not denying or just, trivializing love. But, maybe a word that gets close, not the same, would be compassion. It's different. But language would be really important. And so, people have, in the old days, they called it wisdom, Aristotle. Wisdom? If I think wisdom, and there was the critique too, you need people like me that are losing their hair and get gray. But no, wisdom is also for relatively young people and aspiring people. So judgment to us seemed like the right word as opposed to practical wisdom and wisdom.
And I hear what you're saying. And, when I started wisdom research 30 years ago, or over 30 years ago, it was frowned upon, quite frankly. But since then, if you look at the literature, I think wisdom has gained its reputation or regained its reputation. And I think current leaders are quite open to this, and, who's, the wise leader, and so I think people, would less frown about, and yes, and compassion is part of my wisdom model, but so is cognition and reflection, right? So it's the package. And I think what you have in your model reflects this very well. So I don't know, I just would encourage you not to shy away from it. I think we need this quantum leap, to really talk about wisdom. It's not just business as usual what we need, it's not just judgment. We need to care, right, about the world, if we have any chance. And I think to have this paradigm shift into wisdom might actually do it.
Yes. And I would say, maybe not in the model we call it practical wisdom, but in the classroom setting, we talk about wise leadership. We talk about the practical wisdom, the contextuality, because, it's like sometimes we have to dial up or dial down some of those dimensions, right? I mean, I can be courageous, but I would be reckless, right? And so that practical wisdom, that contextual aspect, Monica, maybe I don't capture that in judgment, but certainly in the debriefing and the conversations in the classroom. And no, it's not that we ignore it. It's just it's not captured front and center in the model. Dusya.
Yeah, it's about capturing their attention, Monica, getting their attention, and then we can talk about wisdom.
I do hear you, but I would encourage you to be bolder, and just, go with it. And you would be surprised, maybe you can capture the attention, even more if you just, okay, we're talking about practical wisdom here. Who doesn't want to be wise, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to draw this conversation close because I think it's absolutely fascinating, but we are on the time. Monica, I'm going to bring music to your ears right now by saying that I've just the University of Birmingham practical wisdom is one of our key overarching kind of virtues for the whole university, and it's going up in big posters around the university. And I think to some extent you just have to take some leadership in this and just hope people go with you. But I've had enough battles to get to there, and hopefully I'm right. And Gerard's I think he knows what he's saying, and sometimes you just have to praise it. But anyway, let's pause it there because we could have this debate for on and on and on. And just say again, a really big thank you to Gerard and to Dusya, and indeed to everyone else who's come along here to join us for this presentation. It will be going out as a recording to follow up afterwards. We've got the last presentation for this series. As I say, I've just said we will be running another series next year, so please look out for that. But last presentation of this series in early July from the University of Navarra, our colleagues there, who'll be telling us what's going on in Spain and Navarra in particular. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world. And thank you again for everyone for joining, in particular to Gerard and Dusya from Ivey. Thank you.
Tom. Thank you,
Thanks,
Tom.
everybody. Thank you, Tom, for the opportunity. Much
everybody.
appreciated. Bye.
Send out the recording if you want to send it on to anyone. Thanks, Lucy.